Well, welcome everybody to our town meeting. I'm Chuck Wiger, and we're here to actively listen and to respond to questions, comments, suggestions that you might have. We're here for an hour, and if we don't have an opportunity to get at everything, we'll figure out a way, one-on-one, or an alternative way to continue that dialogue, which we strongly encourage. I represent District 43, which includes parts of Oakdale, that would be north of 10. And then I have parts of Maplewood, and North St. Paul, Montemedi, White Bear Lake, Ridgewood, Watermead, where we just finished a meeting actually up in Montemedi. So I'll let each of my colleagues give a brief intro, and then we'll get into some of the issues.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming out for a chilly day. We were just saying it's going to get up to 12 today, and that's going to feel awesome. I'm Susan Kent, and I'm the state senator for Senate District 53. And so I represent the other parts of Maplewood and Oakdale than Chuck. So I'm south of 10th Street in Oakdale, and then South Maplewood, basically, south of the railroad tracks is my dividing line. I also have landfall in the city of Woodbury in my district. And so thank you all for being here, and look forward to a good discussion and talking about what might be coming up this session and what's on your mind. Joann?
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Joann Ward, state representative for half of Susan Kent's district. So I have the southern part of Maplewood, southern part of Oakdale, landfall, and the northwest part of Woodbury. And then the rest of Susan's district is the rest of Woodbury. And I'm just really glad that you came out in this cold, cold day, and looking forward to hearing what your concerns are.
Good morning. My name is Lillie, and I'm a state rep for North St. Paul and part of Maplewood, and then Oakdale all the way down to 10th. So starting from the north, coming down. And I live in North St. Paul. I'm pretty excited. I got Oakdale water. Wow. So far, the pressure's been good.
Best in the state.
Showers have been good, thank goodness. So my wife likes that. No, anyways, thank you for coming this morning. It was really nice to come in here. It's warm. My other life, I work at Delta Airlines, so I've been outside a lot in the last couple of weeks. I'm pretty excited to look at the thermometer like all Minnesotans. I have not been appointed lieutenant governor. I don't think any of us have that I know of. But who knows? Anything's possible in these interesting political times. So, wow, we have a county commissioner too. Stan, maybe you want to come up here.
Yeah, join us up here. Pull a chair up and come join us.
So,
Thank you. My name is Paul Reinke. I'm the mayor of Oakdale, and I appreciate our state legislators coming up, and also County Commissioner Karwoski. But these really are our departments at the state level. There's many things that we're doing independent, and there's many other things that we need help. And all of you have been instrumental in making things come together, providing legislation and support to the initiatives to make Oakdale better. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here. It's an honor to serve as your county commissioner. I live in Oakdale, and it's great to see Mayor Reinke is doing the fine job of the great tradition of the council and mayors I think we've had in the past. I've enjoyed working with the legislative body here. The county commissioner, I find we're working even more so than my experience at the city level, so I'm here to learn and listen to the residents. Thank you.
And you're a Winter Carnival royalty.
Right.
And so this is your thing.
Yeah, well, we don't really, I'm more for the red side of the warmth, but we have to go through the hardened winter to get to the warmth of the summer.
are you a Vulcan?
Yeah, Vulcan, and I switch over to the royal family side on the south wind, who helps overthrow Warriors. So both times we won, and brought summer back to not only St. Paul, but Oakdale.
We're going to open it up, and we'd like to just go around the room. If you want to say who you are, you don't have to. I have maybe just 10 seconds or so if you want to mention a particular issue, but again, you can pass. It's whatever you'd like to do, and we'll start with
Could I just interrupt?
Yes.
I wanted to point out we have our County Sheriff Dan Starry back here, who doing a wonderful job throughout the county. And when our Oakdale, fine Oakdale Police Department isn't doing their job, they're always working with the county Sheriff's Department. So thank you. And his wife Jean.
Okay, well, we'll hear from you again. Yes.
Russ Ninus, I live in Oakdale.
So I'm Josie Schneider. I live in 53 and work in 43.
And go ahead.
Sure, I'm with Living All Disabilities.
Some of us had a chance to go out there and visit.
Yeah, and we come see all the stuff every year. So it's an awesome nonprofit that supports constituents with disabilities and also employs people in your district.
Paul Tuvison. I have two concerns. One is the healthcare, of course, we all. His situation with the water pipe breaking, that's really going to be a problem in the future, a near future, all the cities in Minnesota. I mean, we planned to send, I don't know how many years ago, now they're all going to start to break, and I guess I'm looking at the huge expense that every city across Minnesota is going to have.
I'm Dawn Tuvison, and I'm on 53B, so the other side of Joann. And I have many concerns. Close health care is my primary concern, and gun violence is another thing. And the environment, anyway. So I'm really hoping that we can get some people in St. Paul that will truly and honestly work transparently and for the people, not corporations.
Tom Valen, South Maplewood. My concern is state taxes for retirees. Kiplinger's magazine just came up with a new study, and Minnesota is #1 in the country for the worst for taxes for retirees. And I'm in Florida this winter, my first year, and I'm not a resident down there yet. But I'm meeting a lot of people that are moving down there for tax reasons, especially the affluent people. And I just got off the phone. I was parked right next to you, I think. And he saves $85,000 a year just in state taxes. His taxable income is $1 million, but $85,000. He goes, Tom, it's enough for me to do all my housing expenses, living expenses, fly my family down for the whole year down there. That's the difference. So I'm concerned about the taxes for retirees.
Oh, hi.
We're going to just introductions and
Yeah.
a couple of issues.
Yeah, if you want, yeah, it's all voluntary.
My name is Clay Brown. I live just a little ways away in Oakdale. I was here just kind of listen and see what's going on. If I have any burning issue, it's how we're going to resolve the issue with Lieutenant Governor and President of the Senate. But the tax issue is kind of cool. And, I'm nowhere near $1 million taxable income.
It's not that uncommon.
What he saves in taxes is more than I make in a year. So, if Minnesota provides a lot of quality of life issues, which I don't think are present in Florida. If you've ever been there in the summer.
What does your jacket say there?
Green Bay Packers. I was from Wisconsin. I'm in Fort. My kids were born and raised here. But you got to support your team, First time I ever got interested in professional football was in Mequon, Wisconsin. So I kind of stayed that way. Good. Through adult life. And you'd be surprised how many conversations this starts. And it's kind of fun. Kind of fun to talk to people.
You're not alone in the East Metro.
Oh, thank you.
A lot of them.
We kind of like one title. Just one.
We like to get there first, right?
Nancy, we just introduce.
I'm Nancy Livingston. I'm on the school board of North St. Paul Oakdale School District, District 622. Been on since the year 2000. So I kind of following in Senator Wiger's footsteps there. He was on the school board when you were, what, 21 or something? 21 years old? Yeah. Anyway, and I also I work for Senator Wiger in the Minnesota Senate, so nice to see both of you today. Thanks.
Am I up next? I bought Natro, and I just want to show how an old guy can still stand on his own 2 feet. But I'm from Woodbury. I'm an activist. I've been interested in transit. I want sane transit. I want sound economically transit. And remember, transit is not transportation. And so we may be looking at little cars running around under computer control. It might be the ultimate answer. But I've been fighting for years against the insanity of trying to put this stupid, they call it the BRT, but they really want to do light rail. And I've been fighting for it for a long time. I will continue to fight for it as long as I can. So I just want you all to know I love you all. I know all you guys, but I'm here to fight for that forever. So, and by the way, I do have a close relative in Oakdale. So good reason for me to be here, right? Thank you.
Wow, how can you follow that? My name's Linda Stanton, I live in Woodbury, and I'm interested in hearing more about the Affordable Housing Task Force and solutions to the teacher shortage.
I'm Stephanie Weber, I live in Oakdale, and I am mostly here just to listen.
Chris Hansen, live in Oakdale, just here to see what's going on.
Good morning, I'm Sharna Walgren, and I live in Maplewood, and I'm just here to listen.
I'm Andy Tironi. I also live in Maplewood, and no particular issue stands out to me, but I'm soaking up the scenery, mostly the listening part.
Joe Salmon, I live in Woodbury, and my main concern is that we just have to stop spending. You know, 2010 the budget was $32 billion, now it's 46 or 48 billion. You just can't keep spending like that. You got to stop it. That's it.
Allie Waterbury, 53A, just here to learn.
Dan Starry, I'm the county sheriff, and thought it's important to get out to the town halls and meet people, but actually listen to what the concerns are as well. So thank you. This is my wife Janice. So thank you.
I'm Kelly Cosmo. I'm just a community member. My passions are, my son has autism, so schooling, education, and health and human services. And that goes right into, after these people leave school, they're 21, they need to have affordable housing. We need to have directions for them for career paths, so they're a tax-paying citizen, if at all possible. But we need to do more with getting supports to people.
Anthony Bierkes, and I live in 53A. I'm just here to listen.
In Dallas?
Yeah, I'm Dallas Pearson. I do a television show called North Star Oasis, so you can view most of the town halls that happen in, especially SD43, on youtube.com/North Star Oasis. I'm also kind of a policy wonk, and I have no particular policy that I think is like number one because they're all important. But I do think Mr. Salmon's comment was right on task. The burgeoning budget is just terrifying in the scope. And what it does to the retirees' benefits package is not very helpful. So, with that.
Thanks. And what we usually do is, offer some reaction to some of the comments and maybe a couple of minutes each and continue dialogue. And so maybe as the senior person on the panel here, I'll start with
You called this little shindig, so you get to.
Good. Well, budget. And that's something that is a clear responsibility to put together a balanced budget. It's required in the Constitution. Unlike Congress, we have to have it balanced. And last session, and the legislature did do that. It is under Republican control with a Democratic governor. And the spending amount is very transparent. You can go to the website for the state, the Office of Management Budget. It'll have a total breakdown in each category if you want to see what was done. But the process included public hearings, throughout the state, depending on the subject matter. The biggest part of the budget is for education, for K-12. The early ed also has increased importance. And this has been on a bipartisan basis. Again, this does not happen unless it's ultimately bipartisan, the budget, or it would get vetoed, which case this time, it was the legislature funding, and that'll be addressed when we get back into session. So where are we at on the budget at this point? There was a forecast indicating a shortfall, potentially of 188 million, I believe. And so that's not good news. It was cautionary, however, because we'll get the next forecast next month. And it'll be factoring in further holiday sales, which were robust. A lot of activity that's going on, and with the job climate, et cetera, I would think that we would have a rosier picture than what was painted a couple of months ago, but we'll wait and see. This is done in an objective manner when they provide this information, and then we will review that, because if we need to fine-tune the budget, it has to be balanced. And when we get the forecast information, and we start again February 20th, and then we'll decide, sometime in March or April, as to any additional fine-tuning, whether it's up or down, that would need to be done to have a balanced budget. So that's where it is. And again, the control of the legislature now is Republican control of the Senate and in the House, and that's where all spending starts in the House. So the amount that we put in education, in health and human services, which continues to be faced with many, many challenges, particularly in mental health, where we just had a pretty good discussion at another meeting. But those have all been presented to us, and again, ultimately, it's a bipartisan resolution as to the amount of spending. The issue on income tax had a great deal of discussion last session, and in fact, the Social Security part. There's a phasing. It wasn't a total elimination, but it's phased, and you seem to be aware of that.
Well, that gets phased out with your income level.
Right, but in any event, that was what the leadership came up with, and could we do more? Yes, we aren't required to go at a certain level on taxes. That's up to each legislative session as to what they're going to allocate for resources, but it's a process of public hearings, and ultimately, it's the power in each body through negotiation and compromise and committees that you get to the result. The one area that there was a lot of discussion, you mentioned, Florida. Yeah, there's a lot of snowbirds, and for tax purposes, we understand that. We had heard from military, veterans, whose pensions were being taxed, and their military pension, and that was eliminated earlier. And so I don't know how many have actually moved back to Minnesota, but that had been given as a reason to adjust the taxes. There was also...
For that?
Yes, that was done. And there have been people on the estate tax that as well had complained. And I was a sponsor of that legislation. And we had heard, particularly from a lot of people from small businesses, the Mogren family in particular, who we had testified about that, and just saying, it's not a matter of if someone dies, it's when someone dies in the family, and then how the partnership could likely dissolve. And so we had those, that type of testimony, and hopefully that will have a positive impact long term. There's other areas that could be addressed, but it's all based on a balancing act of what our needs are as well. I mentioned schools. The students are our future. It's the workforce and higher ed. And none of these bills go to the governor unless they've been approved by the legislature first. And so, education continues to be the high priority, health, human services, and needs. And I'm sure you could tell us about a number of the needs where you're serving people who are just looking for a chance to thrive and survive and with dignity. So just a couple of quick comments. I'd like my colleagues to weigh in on the budget as well.
I gotta ask one quick question.
Yes.
You said the leadership, early on, you said the leadership decide. Are you referring to Dayton or are you referring to Kirkdale because they have control of the,
For the legislature, the leadership in the House would be Speaker Dowd.
so when you said the leadership decides, I didn't know if you meant Dayton
Yes.
or if you meant Kirkdale.
Governor Dayton would be the leader of the executive branch, and
Right.
has the veto authority. He proposes a budget which is required, but a bill does not pass either body unless it has the blessing of the leader.
The leader's in the majority.
Yeah, in the majority, yeah, in the majority.
Majority party.
So that would be cooked out then.
In the House.
Yes, and one could, and some people would applaud, the action, or that there could have been more cuts. That's a dialogue that is done in each election as to the priorities that Minnesota wants. So, have each of our colleagues, share some comments, and part of the recipients of the money that is allocated, and that's what we do, we allocate and do resources, would be at local government, counties and the cities. First and foremost, public safety. We want to make sure we're safe, and so appreciate you being here, Sheriff. But we can talk about where this money goes as well. But, Susan.
Thank you, and you did a really great job, I think, of going through the recent history and some of the major things that happened in the last session, and where to sort of put us where we are now. And as you say, we'll get that February forecast, and this is all defined by statute. That will determine the budget that we deal with. And this isn't a budget year technically, but if there are significant changes that need to be made, we will have to address those, whether it's making cuts if we have a deficit, or if we want to do a supplemental spending, or what we would want to do with that moving forward. So that's an important benchmark to keep an eye on in February. I want to address Joe's point about the increase in the spending since 2010. Excuse me. And I say this as a former small business person. If my budget as a small business person, my revenue and my expenditures, assuming all things were equal, were the same 8 years later, I'd feel like I wasn't doing my job very well. Because hopefully, in a world where we do have inflationary increases in costs and in spending, things will increase, right? Hopefully, as a business person, you're growing your business. So you want to have a bigger budget 8 years later than you had before, because that means you've got growth. Well, that's exactly what's happening in Minnesota. We are a growing state. There are inflationary costs, so costs do go up that are outside of our control. And we want to stay competitive. A lot of our expenses, we were talking about the teacher shortage, a lot of our costs in education are staff. And so if we're not staying competitive in terms of how we're paying any of our professionals in whatever area as an employer, and this does trickle down to our states, to our counties and our cities as well, then we can't attract the best people, and we certainly want to be able to do that. I will also say that benchmark of 2010, that was, right after the bottom fell out of the economy. So I would definitely hope we've seen some increase since then, because that was a historically rough economic time for our whole country and our state. I think it's reasonable to say that things would have grown since then. I will point to a measure, and I always encourage people to go look for this. It's called the price of government. And this was proposed by the Minnesota State Chamber of Commerce over 30 years ago. And what it does is it looks at the state and local taxes that are imposed throughout Minnesota at all levels, and then basically has a simple math formula by person. So it factors in those growth calculations that are happening in terms of population and everything, and then puts them in real dollars. And it is so that we can have a good, solid pulse on what's going on in our economy and what's happening to Minnesota taxpayers, because we all know that's important. And essentially, there's rounding, but essentially we are at a 30-year low. We've had points where it's been lower, but we've had points where it's been much higher. So this notion that the burden on individual taxpayers is so much higher than it has been in terms of real dollars, if you look at that measure, it is not exploding. Yes, in real dollars it's gone up, but that's for the reasons of inflation and population growth that I was talking about. That doesn't mean we don't need to stay sensitive to that and pay attention to it, but I think it's important that we look at the facts, and I do encourage everybody to go. It is, like I said, the Chamber of Commerce proposed this over 30 years ago. It is a requirement of Minnesota Management and Budget to do that calculation every year. It's in conjunction with one of the forecasts, and so it's usually, I think, around the beginning of the year. I haven't looked at it in several months, so we may be looking at a year-old number. We should be seeing a newer number coming out fairly soon. But it's instructional to see that and understand how that's calculated, because it's an important measure, and it's something that I always look at because, it's something we need to keep an eye on. The two other things I would say about the budget side, and I'm glad we have our cities and counties here, because what happens, and now that I say cities and counties, what we don't have represented, well, we do have Nancy here from school districts, right? So those are our three major local units of government levels, right? So I was at the school board meeting with Representative Ward the other night for South Washington County, which is the southern part of Woodbury and then Cottage Grove, Newport. And, had a good conversation about finances and budgets and what that looks like in terms of the challenges for school districts. We have all, in all of these communities that we represent, seen local levies, right, to increase local taxes for schools. What happens is, if the state does not keep up with some of these things, again, going back to the labor costs and the cost of doing it in inflation, the local community says, hey, wait a minute, you're having to impose cuts that we're not comfortable with. Our class sizes are too big. You've just cut our libraries. You've just cut our arts programs. You've just cut things that really matter to our kids' education. And so then the local school district goes back to the local voter and increases the local property taxes. That's one way of doing things, right? And so, but we just need to recognize that when the state makes cuts, public safety, education, water and infrastructure, higher ed, any of those things that ultimately happen in your local communities, there's going to be pressure then to the local boards and commissions to make up that difference, because they're going to be hearing, hey, my roads are terrible. Hey, we got this big sinkhole, and somebody's got to pay for that, right? And the last thing I will say is just in the big picture. One of the things I think Governor Dayton always says really well is that, Minnesota, people don't move here for the weather, right? I mean, as we sit here on one of the chillier days of the year. But Minnesota has been incredibly successful economically for generations. And that's because we have invested in the things that make us strong, right? It's an incredibly qualified workforce. People come here and they bring their businesses here and they keep their businesses here. Even when they start venturing out into other states, like one where I used to live, Texas, where they don't have income tax, right? Then they realize, wait a minute, they don't have the workforce we need. And so they come back to Minnesota because they know what we've got. And my point is, and again, I'm a former business person, marketing was my background, our qualified workforce, our skilled workforce, our vibrant economy, our diversified economy, and our overall quality of life, that's our competitive edge. We're not going to beat Florida on water, on weather, never, ever, right? Well, I actually like it better here, but that's just me. I don't like the heat and humidity, but anyway.
Yeah, that's only for a few months.
Exactly. Well, it's a long few months. Again, we already
come back
established.
up here in the summer,
I
which everybody does.
Right.
I'm talking retirees, not workers.
Right. Well, I'm talking everybody. So it includes a lot of workers.
Okay. Well,
yeah. But but the things that attract people here, that is our competitive edge, and we need to make sure we protect that and that we make that we're.
You're talking workers, not retirees. Because we have a choice. We can go anywhere.
Right. That's right.
And I've lived here my whole life.
But
And I agree with you.
to that point.
And I agree with you. When I was working here, it was a good quality of life. Okay, my employer was great. My health care was great. I put up with the winter, but now I have a choice. I don't have to stay here. I can't go for a walk outside for 5 months because I don't want to fall. Right?
And
that's quality of life when you're old.
And
to get outside.
Understand, I'm talking about the overall economic vitality of the state.
But I'm talking about retirement.
I understand, and I'm not talking about that right now because I was addressing the budget conversation. And just saying that in terms of the overall economics of the strength of the state, which does matter really to everybody, because if we're not economically strong, when you are here as a retiree in the summer and you need health care, you need to go to the hospital, you need to make sure that that's working. You need to make sure that your streets. But if there's not employees, if we have a worker shortage, that's going to affect you too. So all of these things affect, so that's all I'm saying, this is the big picture, so.
Thank you. I'm just picking this time to chime in because Senator Kent hit on, including Senator Wiger, Senator Kent in particular talked about two main points, the budget and if that budget of passing down the appropriate amount of money to the counties. Also, I wanted to touch on the workforce development because part of one of my committees I got assigned to is I'm on the workforce development board. But I'll first start with our budget. We have a I believe it's $252 million county budget, but about 80% of that is mandated services from the state and federal. So between largely state but also federal funding, we came up, so it's required services. That's the majority of our budget. We're enforcing mandated services, which are good services. They're services to elderly care, abused families, all numerous things. It's all good for our society and quality of life in Oakdale and the county. But we were short 4.5% to meet our requirement. One, we're a growing county, so maybe the funding wasn't keeping up. So we have to pick up 4.5% out of 80% of $252 million. That's a lot. Now, those are, I'm not blaming, it's a bipartisan thing, I'm just telling the facts. So we all pay taxes to the state and it's redistributed back through formulas, and it's not keeping up. So again, it's I'm just saying the fact. Now, what we do have to do is absorb that because by law we have to provide those services, and it's also the right thing to do. So we have to try to be more efficient, which we work at every day to be more efficient providing those services. Or if things aren't working in those laws, is to go back to the legislature and have them be open to change, where we can get more done with less. But you can only do so much. So 4.5% less in funding, and that was this past year. We have to, there's a burden then to pick that money up off the property taxes of every individual in the county. So that's a lot of pressure on keeping our taxes low, and I think we do a good job. So that segues into my work on Workforce Development Board. I'm kind of passionate on that. I serve on the Education Foundation. I went to a vocational school. Later on, I went back to a college. I started a tech school coming out. So I have, the trend now is for, we can grow our tax base in the county. Right now, I believe we're only at 13 or 14% of our taxes in the Washington County are collected from industrial commercial. Other counties like Ramsey and Hennepin are more like 30 towards 40%. So if we're only collecting 13%, we can grow our businesses by getting workers. We have a lot of capacity there. So for every dollar of tax money a business pays in to the county, they only use 29 cents of services. For every household across the state, I think it's like for every dollar paid in, it's $1.20. Now in Washington County, we're pretty affluent. It might be about 90 cents. But we do better when we can grow, keep good jobs here. So I'm on the Workforce Development Board. We're starting to work with, because why the county is on the Workforce Development Board is we want to keep people gainfully employed, keep them off public assistance. So we're going to work, we're starting to work more with, because the school, we got Nancy from the school board here, not only 622, but 833, 834. We're working with the schools to enhance their ability to do career pathways, because not everybody should go to a four-year school. We have businesses in Washington County that want to expand, but they can't find the workers. So we want kids to be more qualified coming out of high school, going to a one-year certificate or a 2-year, because they can always go back to college. That's what I did, and I had my company pay for it. So if in Washington County we can do a better job at developing a workforce, we can expand our companies, provide a bigger tax base by increasing the pie, and do it not on the back the backs of the residents. Thank you.
Thank you. You guys, you have all covered things really, really well, and I'm going to be brief because I know we want to get to some other topics. A couple of statements, though. The size of government is a reflection of the expectations of the citizens. So we have needs and we have expectations and demands, and government responds to that. None of us are going out and saying, we want to get more money so that we can do this. That's not our goal. We're representing our constituents and listening to their voices. So if there are needs, we try to figure out how those can be met, whether through the state legislature or some other avenue. For the snowbirds, I know Susan had the same experience I did, and you all probably have as well. People saying, gosh, we're nearing retirement, or we are retired and the taxes are so high. We can go somewhere else and save a lot of money. But they would add, but we know we'll be back when we need the health care. Because that's what all our friends are doing. They move away, but then they come back. Because the services here are so much better than they can get in other normal places.
Well, let's keep them here all the time.
Yeah. That would be great. But, so people were struggling. As I talked to people at the door, they were struggling with this decision. Move away, So, yes, there is a challenge there. The quality of life people commented on already. I just want to refer to a former congressional representative from Minnesota, a Republican, whose newsletter, this goes back a long way, his newsletter was titled Tonstall. There ain't no such thing as a free lunch.
Robert Heinlein,
Is that where it's from?
science fiction there.
Okay. Well, it was a Republican that used it for the title of his newsletter. And I always thought that was kind of ironic, but it is a very good, strong message. You talked about the pass-through costs if the state cuts funding on some issues that are mandated. Corrections is one of them. Public safety, those kinds of things. But we, as a state, pass offenders to the counties, and the costs are borne by the counties. Uniform costs, uniform funding for education. We are a long way from providing that anymore, and it's mandated. We're supposed to be doing uniform funding for education across the state.
It's in the Constitution.
Yes. That's something the voters wanted, and universally across the state a long time ago. So we're not doing it, and that comes out of the property taxes. So, one way or another, we need to be working on equitable funding and that sort of.
Good morning. It's always interesting for me to hear like the numbers. So, quite honestly, as a legislator, you forget. So, what do you say? $46 billion dollars, and it's a whopping number. A couple things, comments to it. One of the things was mentioned by Senator Wiger, which I just love, that I think people in the public just totally forget, is that we have to balance our budget. Every year, we leave home, when we're done, for better or worse, our balance, I don't know if you guys follow what goes on federally. I mean, it is crazy. Year after year, the deficit is just like out of control. So my flinch point, the reason I bring that up is, yes, our number is big, but it's a little shocking too, because we're going home, we're having honest discussions, we're going to duke it out, and you're going to win some battles and you're going to lose, but at the end of the day, we're going to come up with a number. It's not a fake number like the feds. We're going to come up with a real number, and you may not like it, and there's stuff that I don't like, that I may not like, but the whole thing is just fascinating. I've been really blessed because I've served on a variety of committees, and you go on these committees and you think, oh, you're going to find, because I think as a taxpayer, your big thing is across the aisle is waste. I mean, nobody wants to waste money. That's what I think we all dream about finding, like this waste. Like that's
Somewhere there's a big line item.
Because when you get into budgets, like this lady, when she comes in, and if you guys saw the folks that her people work with every day, and then to look them in the face and say, you know, this person, I have a lady that, in Senator Wiger in our district, she pushes a button, she says, "Hi, my name's Mary." And she's totally dependent on a caregiver. You know, bless you, sir. I mean, that you, and we have, so many of us have been blessed with such a darn good life, you know, that we can go to Florida, we have health. But, you know, it's hard for me as a legislator to look these people in the eye, and it's even beyond the staff. But I think, you know, I always think of the example, like, I hate broccoli. I want a staff person that knows that I don't like broccoli, because I don't want someone to feed me broccoli when I can't tell them. You know, I know this is, you know.
You should eat your broccoli.
I should eat my broccoli.
I'll eat your broccoli.
But it's, so it's just, that's just one area. So then you jump over to transportation and infrastructure. And yeah, this happened in Oakdale. But that can happen everywhere. And it will, and someone mentioned that. So I'm on capital investment, and we're going to be, maybe we'll talk about it. I think, you know, sadly we're running out of time. But we're going to try to do another $1 billion bill. And 2 years ago, we didn't do a bill, so we're trying to catch up. And a lot of it, you know, the public probably thinks it's like exciting stuff, like building a new Metrodome or a new stadium. It's not. It's like, it's roofs on buildings, like at Century College, or water infrastructure around the state. Like, literally, they're piping water still into, like, straight pipes. I mean, it still exists, like, right into, like, creeks and rivers, you know, straight pipes right from your flush. And it's, you know, but like public safety, for example, you know, how do you cut? If you go into these buildings and just see, I mean, there's some bad people. I've been in these, I mean, we want these people locked up. I mean, we all do. You don't want to live in an Oakdale next to any of you. I don't want them, you know, so for me to cut, I don't know how, so it's hard for me as a legislator to cut. You know, so you hear the number, and so maybe I'm not the one to be representing you all, but I'm telling you, I want to find ways, and I look for it, and I think we all do. And, but it's not as easy as you think. But there's failures. We're failing, like this whole license bureau thing right now is an epic failure. And no one's mentioned that. And I'm sorry, you know, that's a state, you know, I'm on state gov finance, and, you know, that's part of our jurisdiction. And, but, you know, they bought this IT stuff, and it's failing. And, you know, people can't sell cars, and that's the economy. But we have other problems too that we haven't talked about, like our minority members. You know, we don't have any, I don't know, anyways, are really struggling, you know, and, you know, we're pretty white, but that doesn't mean we're not paying attention to that and trying to figure it out. I mean, that's a big issue for all of us, trying to figure out how people succeed in schools and then thrive. I mean, right, very close to here is 3M. A lot of the 25 million or 25,000 of the market is these big companies, and one of them's 3M's, just like really done well, which is, you know, Minnesota start, and it's a lot of based on our education. I'm sorry, it's a kind of a rambling answer, but I would like to find ways to. And I'm really proud that we go home, and I've lost a lot of fights, like I wanted to spend more here or less there, and I've won, but at the end of the day, we go home and it's balanced. I hope you guys challenge our federal government, because it drives me batty that they just get away with this year after year after year, and then we get pounded it's really pretty small potatoes. And we do it, we are looking at retirees. It's hard. I was on tax committee, and we look at it, it was easy to do the military people, to be honest, because everybody loves the military, and that's bipartisan. And we actually didn't even fully do the military. We did 20-year retiree veterans.
So they're just a retired military.
That's correct.
Not all military.
That's right. So
that's a very few people.
There's a difference. And so, and when the Republicans have been in charge, they haven't done it to cut the seniors, and we haven't done it either. And it's
But you started. It's a start.
That's right.
You started.
We did.
And you're going to do the rest of it.
Well,
Because I kind of get the feeling that you guys love the veterans more than, you don't really care about the elderly people because we're all going to come back here when we're sick.
And then that's going to be another burden on you guys.
But back to the context.
But we
on
really
the-
are trying to figure it out.
On
And
the-
that's all I wanted
You're
to.
number one on this well-renowned list. It's a well-respected list. My stomach would be churning right now.
I want to see how they
It is.
define it.
I can show you on the computer. I just looked at it last night.
I'm definitely going to go look it up because I want to understand. The one thing I want to say in terms, the one thing I want to say in terms of the Social Security taxes. So before we did what we did this past session and the cuts that we made there, the tax cuts, it was about 50%, a little more than 50% of Social Security recipients in Minnesota were not paying any taxes on their Social Security at all, right? So
It depends what they pay in the federal.
right, exactly, but that adds up to, slightly more than half of Social Security recipients were not paying any taxes on it.
Well, then their income is below $30,000.
Right, exactly. But I'm just trying to state the facts, right? So that was the case. And then we increased that number, and it is phased in, and so that will be increasing, and everybody agreed we needed to expand that number. The challenge then gets to be when we're talking about multimillionaire seniors who have all sorts of investment income and retirement benefits that they get. Should they be exempt from paying taxes on Social Security or not? That's a question.
Well, here's the deal, okay? The fluent retirees are not just not paying taxes now. They're spending money going out to eat. They're spending money on cars down there, housekeepers, maintenance. They're spending thousands and thousands of dollars in Florida and Texas and Arizona, Georgia. Any 49 other states would be cheaper than this one.
They're also just investing their money and they're not paying
And
taxes.
the fluid people
And the
create
cheaper
jobs.
people are
Well,
eating and
not the
paying heat
Investment
and buying
through
cars.
investments.
Yeah, don't you want those people to stay here, the people at the higher income?
So-
I'm saying-
You're going to get more tax revenue from
I'm
it.
just sharing that as the numbers, and that's the question.
You're
Right.
losing
I
tax
have-
revenue.
We have some other people who haven't had a chance to talk.
I would like to say something, and we have all different levels here. We have retirees, we have all the way down to children. I have a 9-year-old son with autism. My husband works at 3M. He is a tax-paying citizen. We cannot save for retirement because of our disabled son, because we have to pay for him to have MA. We have people from birth to senior citizens that need to have good quality nurses, good quality doctors that can research these medical complexities. We have people who get dementia or Alzheimer's. The dignity of those people, regardless if it's birth to 105, we need to make sure that we have people who can caretake. And until you get into that position, you don't understand. We have a crisis. I don't care if it's Minnesota or if it's Florida. We don't have enough personal care attendants. We don't have enough home nurses. And we have people sitting in the hospitals. If you want to talk about government waste, it costs 5 times more for somebody to sit in the hospital because we can't find in their community where they live a nurse to come out for complex medical needs, okay? So when we talk about dignity of life, we need to be thinking about people with disabilities. I think people with disabilities should be able to get jobs. More of them should be able to get jobs. They do not have jobs. A lot of these people do not have jobs. We need to help these people. Teachers are not psychologists or psychiatrists. When a child comes into school dysregulated, they cannot be educated. They need to have their mental health taken care of before they can be educated. And that is not the job of a teacher to become a psychologist or psychiatrist or to try to figure it out. So we need more partnerships. Okay? These children grow up and they fall between the cracks. Then what? Our police. We are trying to get more police training, but our police officers are not psychologists or psychiatrists. And I will end with, I had an uncle commit suicide, September 2016. He fell between the cracks of life. I think he had autism. He went to a bed. They kicked him out. They said he wasn't bad enough. He committed suicide 2 days later. So as a community member, as a state of Minnesota, regardless in Florida, I'm sure they're very short personal care assistants. They're very short of nurses because a lot of these people, and that's why people come back. Sorry.
Sorry. How about immigration? We can pull back on immigration. Some of your needs can be met. People that were born here that have a right to that.
I have a PCA right now who's a dreamer. She is 18 years old. She will not be able to work for me past March 29th. I would like to see the Dreamers Act passed. That's not a state thing, it's a federal thing. But there's a lot of good quality people. You have people from Brainerd that all these resorts, they cannot find people to work. They want people to come in. You have to think about it. We have a big Karen community, Hmong community. These people are dignified just as much as we are. We all have the same color blood. We need to help everybody.
Well, we can't. That's the problem. We are requesting something that's irrational. And this is where we have to determine where we're going to pull back.
But the misunderstanding is, if you look at communities throughout the state of Minnesota, and you pointed to the tourism issue, and that's throughout northern Minnesota, where we have the tourism industry, that's been a huge problem. In agriculture, it's also a huge challenge. There are smallish, I'm not talking tiny, I'm talking well-known communities around Minnesota who are doing pretty well and keeping their schools open because of the immigrant population. Those families are moving there. They are coming in. They're doing the work that our state needs done in our agriculture industry, which ripples throughout our entire economy. Same with our tourism industry. And so healthy immigration is healthy for our
Legal
economy.
immigration.
This is not healthy here, and it's not right.
Legal immigration.
You're born here.
We're
You have
talking
a
about
right
legal
to some
immigration.
things. You just can't, we can't keep taking people in, like she said. That's in a perfect world. You have to pull back. There has to be something that we take away. Are we going to take it away from people that were born here and have that right? Everybody's born somewhere. There's a piece of land. Maybe we need to empower them on their own land.
Maybe we should make them into taxpayers.
That's a good idea.
Okay.
Well, they are.
Not
all
all
of
of
them are
them.
taxpayers.
Not all of them. That's
Oh,
not
most
true.
of them are.
No.
Most of them are.
Where are
But
those
there's a lot of
statistics
people that are born here that are paying taxes either.
Dallas, you had your
Yeah, I've got two comments along the lines of what Susan said and what Lillie said. First, on the budget, if you go to the, I'm was sort of a statistician working at 3M. Go to the Office of Management of the Budget, and basically you can see the spending numbers. You really can't isolate what the budget was, what the bonding was. Look at the spending, and there was there was a change in slope that happened around 2010. So it was growing at let's say this much, it suddenly went this way. So there was a big change that happened. It basically grew through that entire period. I got to applaud the two gentlemen in the ends because I live in Oakdale and I'm fairly intimately involved in watching the city council, as they can attest to. And the budget has been beautifully handled in Oakdale, not like the surrounding cities. For Leon's point, you want some suggestions?
Yes, sir.
The gentleman from St. Cloud, who was a member of your body a few years ago, had put in the sunset rule, which was immediately dismissed, I believe, when the Democrats came back into power. I can't remember when that was.
2012.
Sunset rule was quite effective at limiting some growth. The other thing that would be really helpful is eliminating what's essentially baseline budgeting, although I don't think you guys call it baseline budgeting at the state level. But that's where agencies come in and say, here's what we spent last year, we need this much more. No discussion about this, just this part. And if you say we're going to shrink the budget, it's usually this is shrinking back down to the baseline. How much growth is there off the baseline? Those two things, and I think you'd find a huge difference in your budgetary requirements. Inflation is about 1.8, 2.1%, I believe the Fed said, and the state is running probably 5 to 6% growth. So it's a huge difference between just normal inflation growth and what the state budget is growing.
Paul? This is senators and representatives at town hall. My job here in Oakdale as a mayor is to help guide the process for setting priorities. We're closest to the residents, we're closest to the taxpayers in Oakdale, and you know how to get a hold of us. I mean, this isn't my show. This is a chance to talk. on a broader level with the state, and also some of the federal issues that you guys have relationships with our state senators and federal people, so back to you guys.
Linda, you had brought up affordable housing, and you said that was an issue.
I was just curious to hear more. It seemed like, they've got this task force now. The report won't come out till the end of July. Governor Dayton will be out of office, so it sort of seems kind of late, and the report will come out after the legislature's done. So I'm kind of wondering, what's the expectation? Is it just a report?
Do you guys has anybody been close to that issue recently? Because I've heard this through, because I've worked on higher education for a number of years and workforce development, and so the workforce conversation is what I've been a part of a lot. And we hear this in a bunch of different ways. And I was actually just up north recently and was talking to somebody who works in real estate. And one of the biggest sort of ceilings for greater Minnesota right now is the lack of affordable housing. So for people who would be workers in some of these jobs, like particularly if you think about some of the resort towns, where cabin ownership, for example, increases real estate values for second home owners. But for people who are going to work in the community doing, average jobs that need to get done year in and year out, they can't afford to live in those communities. Or, was it Polaris wanted to do a big expansion up north, and they couldn't because they didn't have a place to put the workers they wanted to hire. So this is a comprehensive challenge, and I know that's part of what's going on. And the only thing I would say in response to you is, I agree. I always wish we could wave a magic wand and have the answers tomorrow, but having participated in some of these groups, if we want really good insight and understanding, particularly when you're talking about this physically large state, you need to have time for people to come in and be able to really debate the issues and talk about it and inform that process so that you get a better product at the end of it that gives us better information moving forward. So I'd rather have it done right than done right now.
I'd like to add to that, and that it does take time to put that together and to put together a report that will be meaningful. We can't, there are various task force and there are various issues that are being researched and developed, and it's during the interim, what you're talking about, it's during the interim that we can, as legislators, look at those things and learn from them, because we're not on the task force. But we need to be able to look at that report and digest it and see what we can do about it and work with the other staff at the Capitol to come up with some proposals, some response to it. So if this one comes out in July, we might have a different one on child abuse or some other big issue that other people will be looking at, and then we can have some things ready for the session. So it's not, yes.
Okay.
And regardless of who's in charge, there will still be some work that's being done during the interim that will be ready for the next session.
One report that will be issued at the end of the month or early February will be on abuse of the elderly. The Star Tribune did a very good expose. There's been a lot of discussion, finger pointing, and let's get to the bottom of it. There's zero tolerance for not having a prompt investigation and when a complaint has been filed. A commissioner has resigned as a result of that, but this is something that the legislative session will certainly be reviewing further through the committee process. And I believe ARP, you're familiar with ARP and Mary George at their organization is a part of this task force that is taking recommendations. If there's examples, please forward that. It's very critical that we get this right.
I'd like to add on to that conversation as well, as I've been working on foster care and adoption. Like in the criminal justice system, when we have probation officers and people who are working in corrections for post-release, in Health and Human Services, these staff have caseloads that are far too high. Far, far too high. And the reason that that is in place is that we're not funding the agencies enough for them to have the staff that they need to be able to do some of these jobs properly. So whether we're talking about the License Bureau issues for the cars, or something else, we need to be able to properly fund things on the front end, so we don't end up paying more for the year. And we need to be observing and responsible. We need to be having some follow-through and evaluating. And then we need to provide the resources that are needed.
From a resident, I've got one question, maybe will resonate with you guys. That's the notion about the opioid epidemic. Recently I was with a film director doing some planning, and I asked him jokingly about his business, thinking about as we get older. That's the moment we have capacity. And he said it's it's double-digit increases. He said, but surprisingly, it's young people committing suicide. And then he linked it to the opioid epidemic.
Mortality tables now have.
Yes.
And it just surprised me. So then it just reemphasized how locally it's tough, not statewide. It needs some attention. I don't know what the answers are, but it sure needs some attention.
To follow up on the opioids, Washington County joined with the other counties in a lawsuit because these painkillers, they were marketed really illegally with the intention that they would be addicting. There's a lot of fact on that. So it's a tremendous cost to the county. So we talk about the unfunded mandates and the money not keeping up with the need. So our death rate has increased in the county. I think we had about 27 people die of opioids. I must give a shout out to Sheriff Dan Starry and his efforts in the county. So we talk about a budget. Yes, our budget has to be balanced, but at the same time token, we want to make Washington County a quality place to live. So we targeted some investments in opioids, some sex trafficking. Again, Sheriff Starry working with our attorney's office to keep the quality of life. We want to make it a great place to live. We'd rather snip these problems out before they become big. So, you know, Sheriff Starry, if you want to say anything about the opioid.
I would say that we certainly see it here in Washington County. It's obviously it's a national epidemic, but certainly in Washington County and locally here in Oakdale, we certainly see the increase in the effects. Just on Thursday and Wednesday, we had 2 overdose that we responded to. We implemented naloxone in all of our squads. All of our deputies carry it, plus our sergeants in the jail carry it as well. They're trained in that. We have saved numerous lives over the last 2 years by doing that, and we'll certainly continue that. But we do see the increase, unfortunately, with the opioids within Washington County. I know that we're holding a workshop here in about 2 weeks, the county board, making sure that we as the county still look forward to how do we address what we are seeing within Washington County and for the citizens.
Dan, and can I just add on to what you just said, because I think it knits together a few of these things. So naloxone, for those of you who may not be aware, is an antidote for opioid overdose. And if it's administered quickly, it saves lives. It absolutely saves lives. But it used to have a very narrow ability to administer it. You had to have a prescription and it had to be done by. So if your folks get to somebody and you have to transport them to the hospital, it may be too late. So we passed a law called Steve's Law just a few years ago that enabled first responders to be able to administer it. And other states did the same thing because they knew we're just talking about saving lives, then we can try to treat the person after we've saved them. And immediately, the drug companies cranked up the prices on that product. And then that gets borne by our local governments, have to carry it around to do public safety. So it's, you know, it's just so unfortunate because that's just, it is a common sense lifesaver.
And I think people of all walks of life are being affected by it. Someone that had major surgery that gets hooked on what they think are painkillers. Then when we get into the, not only those that eventually die of it, but the many more, probably hundreds throughout the county that are lose, get addicted, they lose their job, they get into abusive situations in their household. So it creates a lot of social service costs that puts a big burden on.
So what do you see as a solution? Rather than being reactive, how do we become proactive in that area?
We've implemented a number of things, so ways to do a better job of tracking so that people can't dock shop, exactly, and so that there have been things like supporting programs, and I know a lot of sheriff's offices started on their own, having like drop-off days for your pharmaceuticals, but now like Walgreens and the pharmacies are doing that, and we've done some things to support that. But we've tried to put just a $1 fee on those prescriptions to cover some of these sorts of education and prevention type programs. Those got pushed back from the industry, of course. They can raise the price on naloxone, but they won't let you put a $1 fee on the things like I just had oral surgery in November, and I know from past experiences I don't like taking those. I also had never had my wisdom teeth out in my mid-50s, so I wasn't sure what to expect. I was like, can I just get like 6 if I wanted to take them? But they couldn't do it.
But that's it right there. For having your teeth pulled, they give you something that's strong. I have 4 daughters, and I tried to give them to each one of them. You know what? I took them away. Yeah. They got tied all 3.
Right.
They were fine.
Exactly. And again, it's like, why couldn't I just have a few days worth, and if I needed them, then I could refill it? But no, the only way they could do it was to give me a certain, and it was less than it used to be. They used to just give huge prescriptions to everybody, and they're bringing, I know. So anyway, we are doing things, and we're trying to, because we know that it's just hugely important, and it's, again, it has ramifications in all aspects, because it is costing our public safety people. It is, and then the cost. And I imagine all of us know a family that has been touched by addiction, and it's just heartbreaking. And these are our young people. And kind of what we were talking about. We need everybody to be healthy, and as those of us who are in the baby boom generation, we need everybody healthy and in the workforce as we get older and need some help. Otherwise, that's an economic challenge.
Dennis prescribed 30% of the opioids, and the physicians, each of their licensing boards, their trade associations are very actively addressing this, and I think it's all hands on deck. And the president is at least talking about it as well. Money is also needed to address the people that are in beds,
and we don't have enough beds, mental health beds. Well, and there's another debate that's sort of interesting in terms of treatment, that, within the treatment world, there's a debate about, is it cold turkey, or is what happens with the brain so significant in the case of opioid addiction that we need to use more of a medical model to do that.
And that varies with individuals.
It does, but right now there's a real reluctance to go with the medical model. So those are the debates that are the discussions that are happening. And,
it's good to hear that.
We have time for one more comment.
I just wanted to comment on when you asked what do you do about that. It's the price gouging that the pharmaceuticals are allowed to do. It's that drug, it's on cancer drugs, it's on MS drugs, it's on diabetes drugs, the EpiPen. So as long as the pharmaceutical companies are allowed to do that, and then you go to the insurance companies. So let's get rid of both of those and single payer, and we'll have a problem.
Yeah. But there too, we're really limited at the state level. That's really going to have to be a federal solution.
I know, but it can start here, and people need to be educated on what the problem is. That is the problem.
Well, and part of that, behind that is what lobbyists are allowed to spend.
Exactly.
And what they do.
Exactly.
And the whole campaign finance issue is huge when it comes to.
So it's all webbed together for this, which really could be a very simple solution.
There will be work on the opiates this year, be certain, during the session. There's a state representative from western Minnesota that lost a son and started kind of innocent, like Commissioner was talking about. His son was an athlete, got injured, and just, and certain people it just clicked wrongly, unfortunately, and then he's gone. And then And then there's another member that lost a daughter.
We have a
So it's-
senator whose
Senator
daughter
who lost her
was
daughter.
talked overdose. I mean,
And she's been a leader on this issue.
But I think, as they've mentioned, it's happening everywhere, but I had a strangest discussion recently with a Mayo doctor that said that there's a lot of people in our society that people don't realize that just can't get through every day without some pain meds, you know, that are at a pretty high level, not like aspirin or something. I mean, that they need that. People, he said, you'd be surprised, the people that are successful out there running companies and stuff, this is a Mayo doctor, and says that couldn't make it through the day without having, so it's figuring out this balance, and you don't know who's gonna go too far. So anyways, it's a complicated discussion, we're gonna have it, and hopefully we can succeed, unless, I mean, it's just, it's scary, because it just could be anybody, and you don't know.
okay, we're going to have we can stay for a little bit, but we're going to close in just a few minutes here. I want to thank Paul for opening up the city hall for us, and if maybe each of us could give 30 seconds concluding remarks, and then we'll adjourn and continue to meet informally. But, Paul,
Senator,
how to reach you, and
you guys, anybody that's in Oakdale, got the website, or call myself or any of the councilors. We'll be glad to respond. So thank you.
Thank you for coming out on this cold morning. I was on the city council before I was in the legislature, and I'm a little jealous of our county commissioners and our city council members and even school board, because when I was on the council in Nursing Hall, you had to count to 3 to pass something. In the legislature, we got 134 House members, 67 senators, and a governor. So it's it's not as much as fun and at times. And I have ideas that it's virtually impossible to pass something individually. And you could meet with a council member, and it could be the city law on Tuesday or whatever. But it's
a little bit more complicated than that, but yeah.
Anyways, it's an honor to serve there, but it's if we all go there wanting to get stuff done, and it's a complicated place. So I'm a bit of a revolutionary, and I'm not even sure that our legislative model is ideal. But anyways, that's kind of not a good way to end. But it's the truth. It's the truth.
I'll see if I can map them a little bit. Well, in addition to all of the things that we've talked about and a whole lot more that we all end up working on, I've been focusing on a bipartisan approach and some development and training within the legislature to change the legislative model, at least to be a little more effective. And we have a bipartisan caucus that's working on professional development program as well as relationship building within the legislature, bipartisan, bicameral, and it's slow to change a culture, but we're making progress.
And I just say very quickly, thank you, Joann. You really have been an incredible leader on that issue for several years. And it's exciting because I think we're going to have an opportunity to see it's been building, but I think this year we'll have an opportunity to really branch into some things. And it's part of it's the culture and how we work together. But there are also some structural things that we can do. I think Dawn brought up the issue of transparency. And, I think and a lot of people have said that this past session we reached really a low point, and we need to do better, in terms of things that were rushed, hearings that were not had, things that got stuck into bills without vetting. And we have a process, and we have rules, and if we follow them, the public has an opportunity to be involved and to see what's going on, and that's paramount. That's the main reason they exist. And it gives everybody a chance to sort of vet all this stuff, which means, troubleshoot. Where are the negative and unintended consequences here? So, and that's a bipartisan thing. I mean, yes, this year happened to be under Republican leadership, but there are plenty of criticisms to go towards the DFL on this too, in terms of a trend. So I'm hoping that we can continue working on that, and some interesting ideas have been brought up that would just add to some of the rules that we have that would encourage more of that kind of transparency. Because ultimately, and again, thank you, Paul, for being here and for participating in this discussion today, but then moving forward. One of the nice things is, since we're not starting until February 20th, a lot of you are in our district. Call me if you want to meet at one of the coffee shops or McDonald's for coffee. I'm happy to meet at any time and have a conversation about whatever's on your mind. And having all three of the local units of government here, you really see the partnership that happens, because we do listen to each other and we interact quite a bit on particular projects and just sort of in general. And it's, as somebody who, unlikely, and I was not in the city council or the school board, as Chuck was when I was a fair bit younger. I was new to this. I came in as a citizen legislator, and so I've come into this with fresh eyes. And you know, the collaboration that happens, I do think that's the strength of the legislative model. Not to say that there are some shortcomings with me, but the collaboration that happens between constituents and legislators and local units and federal delegation as well is pretty powerful. So thank you for being a part of that today.
Want to thank you all for coming. It's an honor representing citizens. Want to shout out to our Sheriff Dan Starry, who didn't need to come over here, but he's willing to sit and he makes his way around the county. Thank you. I want to thank Mayor Reinke. It's always fun to come back to the city I live in, and I appreciate the work you do. And as a county commissioner, we like to work really well with the city and support the city of Oakdale on the initiatives where we play a part. And I want to thank the legislative body here for inviting me to sit up here. I know that we do as a county work really well with Representative Lillie, Representative Ward, Senator Kent, and Senator Wiger. So regardless of your party, they work tremendously hard for the best interest of the citizens. All citizens count with this group. We are later this month, January 23rd, as a county board. Our entire board will meet with the, I think it's 15, represent the legislative body that represent Washington County. So that's an annual meeting to go over our county initiatives and make sure we're on the same page with our legislative
Would that
body.
take place here?
No.
I forget where it's at.
Oh, March sometimes.
Yeah.
Is that actually public hearing? It has to be, doesn't it?
You know,
I
it
don't think
probably is, because everything talking about the citizens' work, so it'll be listed in the newspaper. But I think any organized thing where more than two elected are there, that you're going to have a public meeting notice. But it's a healthy thing to do. And again, thank you for inviting me.
Well, again, thank you. On behalf of us as public servants, we appreciate the honor of service, and we recognize you are our boss, and that is renewed and reevaluated each time. We never take that for granted. I think this is a very good cross-section of our districts, and we recognize that we have a diversity in points of view, and having that discussion is very healthy. That discussion will continue. As I said, we will have committee hearings and look forward to that continued dialogue. You probably all know what our emails are and get our newsletters, etc. But if you don't and just found out some other way, let us know. We do regular communications as well. So thanks again. Many of us will be here to continue.
Can we get the group picture?
the whole group?
Oh, yeah, we may take a picture if any.